Good afternoon and welcome to the Oxford MBA Application Tips webinar. I'm Amy Major, one of our MBA recruitment managers here at Saïd Business School, and joined this afternoon by Charlotte Kelshika, who's one of our admissions advisors. So thank you for joining us, whichever part of the world you're dialing in from, be it morning, afternoon or evening. And this afternoon we're going to sort of take you on a real sort of whistle-stop tour of our application tips. Along with that, we're going to provide a little bit of context around the programme and the kind of candidates that we also look for, and the profile of our MBA candidates. So we've got constantly more people dialing in, so we'll just probably pause for just about 30 seconds before we just fully get started, as the number of people dialing in is constantly increasing. So
just to make sure that you can hear us, if you wouldn't mind just typing into the dialog box in front of you that you can hear us. Fab, someone has. Thank you so much for letting us know.
Excellent, lots of yeses. So I would presume if there are any issues that might be at your end with your own PC. So for anybody who's just dialed in, again, a quick introduction. I'm Amy Major, one of our MBA recruitment managers here at the Business School, joined by Charlotte Kelshika, one of our senior admissions advisors here in the team. So pleasure to be with you this afternoon. We are recording this as well, so we will be sending this out afterwards. So if there's anything you feel that you miss, then you will be able to listen in. So we're going to sort of divide the time roughly sort of half between the presentation and questions and answers. So if you do have questions, obviously maybe just hold fire on those for now, as we're obviously going to run through quite a lot of information. We would urge you, once we get to the question section, to obviously you want to get your personal situation understood, if you've got something that's specific and very individual to you. However, obviously if it is a really sort of personal, detailed inquiry, perhaps you might like to leave that to an email inquiry afterwards. So try to keep your sort of questions as generic as you can for the benefit of everybody dialing in. So again, thanks for joining us, and we're going to get started. So I think this first slide you see here is really probably what you think of when you Google Oxford University. And the reason we show you this is that the University of Oxford, which comes as no surprise, is an integral part of the experience that you would have here as an Oxford MBA. So as an MBA, a full-time MBA student, so it is a full-time programme spent here in Oxford for the year. So it's not an online or a part-time course, just to make everybody aware. You will be spending that in Oxford. So what you can see here is the real historical buildings that is the centre of Oxford. And how I would describe Oxford, it's a campus university, it's a campus city. The university very much takes over the whole of the city. And how does that work sort of practically? So as an MBA, once you accept your offer to the programme, you will then select one of Oxford's fine colleges to be your college membership for that year. Now, given the age of some of these colleges, buildings that you can see in front of you, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would live inside that college. There is lots of postgraduate accommodation around Oxford. There are also some of these colleges with postgraduate accommodation within the actual grass quadrangle area that you see of the college. But essentially, you're going to spend your time between the Oxford University buildings, but predominantly you're going to be spending your time in the business school. So this is probably not so much what you think of when you think of Oxford. However, this is the Saïd Business School, so we're a 22-year-old young cutting-edge business school. So very much we position ourselves as a cutting-edge business school, embedded in very much a world-class university, looking to tackle the next generation or even this generation's problems, challenges, and all of the issues that are out there in the world that we face today. So the business school is located only 5 to 10 minutes from some of those great historical buildings that we saw on that last slide. It's where you're going to spend most of your time. So think of it as maybe your workplace, and then think of the college and the access to the college in terms of your membership as somewhere where you may get involved in sports, you may attend a formal dinner in one of the great dining halls, you may go to a ball, and you may be involved in lots of wider networks, and also just general access to other postgraduate students. So that's important to stress, and that's why we really want to show you that today, because that may be something that you might want to think about in your application. We are not a standalone business school, so therefore in terms of the experience that you have and how you might like to approach your application, there is quite a distinction there. You very much have a business school within a wider university experience. Something else I would stress, I've myself have personally just been on our recruiting tour in Australia, and I think people were quite surprised when I was over there and explained that we are only an hour from London. So it's a direct train ride from London. So thinking of career opportunities, access to opportunities in London, absolutely very, very accessible. The business school is located right next to the station, and you can easily spend a lot of your time in London if you so wish. So I think probably if you're at the point of looking to consider to apply, a lot of the question I quite often come across is what type of candidate do you look for? What will make me a good applicant? I would really stress that you move away from thinking about what type of applicant we look for. I think what this shows is that we really look for a diverse pool of candidates to bring to our programme every year. So these are actually the stats of our batch from just the cohort that just finished up this last year. So things that I will sort of comment on there in terms of, I think, what makes Said quite interesting. So we've got quite a sizable cohort. So if you're looking at business schools across Europe, this is definitely quite a sizable cohort. So what that allows us to do is have the reach in terms of bringing employers to campus. What does that also mean practically for you? That means you have quite a big network and access to a fairly big network. However, when that translates into class experiences, you're never going to be taught in a group that's bigger than a group of about 80 people, and when you're in your elective classes, you'll be in a much smaller groups than that. As you can see, it's internationally really diverse. So only 8% UK nationals on the programme. That's fairly comparable with most European schools. It's not a sort of shocking stat. It's no surprise that it's a hugely diverse cohort. So if you currently perhaps are working somewhere, or you're in an environment where you see that you are around a type of individual, people of similar skill sets, that is not what you're going to find here at Oxford. So if you want to find yourself thrown into group projects where you're working with nobody of the same background as yourself, nobody from a corner of the world that you've had experience of or travelled to, then potentially Said could be a really interesting place for you. Moving on to female participation, this is obviously something that is very on the radar for most business schools and every organisation globally at the moment, and we're really proud to have 41% female participation in the programme. This is something that we have grown and focused on over the last few years. What I would stress, definitely not to the point of positive discrimination. However, I think that Said is very fair at judging candidates on merit, and that's something that we will come on to, and Charlotte will definitely actively endorse. So yes, we have increased the number of scholarships that we may offer to women, as funding tends to be a larger issue for women applying to MBAs. However, we are looking to sustainably, hopefully, reach gender parity at some point in the future. Moving on to work experience. Again, I hear time and time again, I have 3 years experience, or I have 8 years experience. Your average is 5. Does that mean I shouldn't apply? Please, remove those thoughts from your head. It's very much about when is the right time for you. However, there is a point where we would suggest that you may be a little bit too junior for the programme, or potentially a little bit too senior for the programme. As you can see from this in the class profile, it's really important to consider the people that are going to be around you, the network, and what you're going to take from that cohort of people. So if you have 12, 13, 14 years of experience, you may find yourself better suited to the executive MBA, where the average work experience is 15 years. Equally, if you only have a year of work experience, you might want to question what you might bring to your fellow classmates, to class discussions, in terms of experiences you've had. A lot of the MBA, it's a very general business course in many ways. However, there are electives where you are deep diving into certain areas, and having experiences of things in your workplace, in a couple of different working environments, of things that have gone well, things that have not gone so well, understanding different leadership styles. These are things that will greatly help you as a candidate on the MBA. So please do think about when is the right time for you. Moving on to the GMAT, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more, but that is a median GMAT, so equates to about an average of around 682. And this has been a consistent stat for our class profiles over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I would say. Would you agree, Charlotte?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, we take a very holistic approach to application, so I'm going to come on to that a little bit more in the coming slides. But you do want to be aiming for something in that sort of mid to late 600 range in comparison with other parts of your application to make it competitive in the round. So coming on to application requirements.
So what do we look for in a candidate? And Amy's already fleshed the answer out to that question pretty fully, but looking under the bonnet, exactly what kind of materials are you going to have to gather together in order to put your application together? Yes, we're interested in your undergraduate degree, of course. So what that means for you practically is you need to lay your hands on your degree transcripts. You don't want your degree certificate at this stage. It will be your transcripts or your mark sheets, in other words, a document that's going to show the admissions committee what you've studied, where you've studied it, and how you've performed across the duration of your studies, not just your final degree GPA or classification, but exactly what scores you got for every module. In terms of the kind of level of degree GPA that we'd be looking for, it's fair to say that in the UK system, we'd be looking for a strong showing around upper second class honours. So that would equate in the US to a minimum score of about 3.5. Having said that, we will always entertain applications from people that have much better, stronger showing in their undergraduate performance, and indeed also from those who have maybe missed the mark slightly academically, but can round out their applications through other attributes across their profile, which I'll speak to in just a moment. We really don't mind what you studied at undergraduate degree. We are not seeking only those students who have a really strong quantity background. As Amy said, this is a general management MBA that we teach here at Oxford. So we are looking to admit a diverse class, and that includes diversity in your academic background as well as your professional background. So your degree transcripts is what we are going to want you to provide as part of your online application. And if you've already studied at master's degrees at degree level, then of course we're going to want to know about that too. And again, upload your transcripts for any master's degree that you also hold. Professional experience, Amy's already talked a little bit about the kind of experience that we're interested in. It really is a minimum, ideally, of at least 2 years, really purely so you have something to bring to the class, so that you have had a little bit of experience of real life, you know, tackling some of those challenges that we do face in the workplace. Perhaps you've worked internationally, perhaps you've been promoted a few times during your career to date. This is the kind of experience that the admissions committee will be looking for. Perhaps you speak a number of different languages, having worked in different territories, or maybe have clients scattered across the world and are used to working with perhaps a diverse range of clients. We are going to want to see your CV to tell us a little bit more about your professional experience, and we would like you to try and keep that to just 1 page, please. Even if you might have many years of experience to bring us, it's a good exercise to just try and distill that to a really clear 1 page, 1 side document. We also ask for your results of a GMAT or GRE test, and this is something that you need to provide us when you apply. If you apply with a view to taking the GMAT or GRE in the future, your application won't be assessed. It will be incomplete. So it's really important that you do provide us your test scores when you apply. And for those of you who are maybe thinking, well, I haven't actually started studying for either test yet, should I take the GMAT or should I take the GRE? It's really up to you, to be quite honest. We are very happy to receive the results of either test. And score-wise, we're looking for something to sit around that 690, 700 mark. That would be seen as broadly competitive. Of course, thinking about your potential future careers, you may find that your GMAT is going to be instrumental in that regard, and therefore the GMAT score that you aim for might be slightly higher than 700. We ask you to write 2 essays as part of your application also. These are really just designed to show us how you think, what moves you as a person, what makes you tick, what you're interested in. One is very broad-based insofar as tell us about a trend or statistic that you've observed that you care about, that you have a strong feeling about. It shocks you. Why does it shock you? How could it be changed for the better? How does it inspire you? Maybe it inspires you in a professional capacity. Maybe you tell us about a statistic you've observed in the workplace, something pertaining to your field of expertise, or maybe your sector, or maybe it's just the future of work. Or it could be something that's nothing really to do with work at all. It could just be something that moves you or shocks you personally, individually. It might be something to do with geopolitical developments or the wider economy. It really is up to you what you tell us about in this essay. The second essay just asks you whether there's anything else that you'd like to tell the admissions committee. And it really is as simple as that. Is there anything else you would like to tell the admissions committee? If so, what? And yes, in theory, you could leave this essay blank, but I would strongly recommend you to not do that. It's an absolute missed opportunity to tell us a little bit more about yourself. You might want to tell us about another aspect of your application. For example, we talked about degrees just now and GPA. Maybe you took your degree 6 years ago and you were a really different person back then. Perhaps you were studying a subject that you weren't really excited by, but now you work in a very different field. You might want to explain those choices to us and that journey, and maybe why you slightly underperformed in your undergraduate degree, if that's the case. We'll also ask you to write fairly extensively around your career development plan. This is a really important reflective exercise and a critical part of your MBA application. You're about to invest a year of your life and a not inconsiderable sum of money studying for an MBA for a reason. And we need you to articulate that reason to us on your application as clearly as you can. Tell us whether you are looking to advance in your career and carry on along the same trajectory, but maybe take the step up the ladder to a more senior position. Maybe now you're actually looking to switch sector. Perhaps you come from a background in a certain discipline and you're attracted by potentially pivoting your career into a new marketplace or sector, in which case tell us about those plans. Tell us about people you know who have made similar transitions. Tell us about the advice they've given you. Tell us about your plans between now and arriving at the business school to help you start the program on a positive trajectory towards achieving your goals. Perhaps you are an entrepreneur, you're running your own business and you really want to develop that and take it to the next level, in which case tell us a little bit more about your business. And also around the careers piece, I think be realistic about what you can achieve in a one-year program. We want to make sure we're admitting people to the program that have absolutely the best chance of getting from it what they want. We want you to be successful. So ask yourself, is this transition realistic and feasible? And am I going to be able to achieve this during a one-year MBA that's going to be an intense academic experience in itself? Next, we are going to look at references. Now, we only ask for 2 references to support your MBA application, and these can be from either a professional relationship or an academic relationship. I would suggest if you've been out of academia for a couple of years or more that you keep your referees professional. Now, these could be people that you report to in a professional context, perhaps your superiors, but you could be quite creative around who you ask to be your referees. For example, you could ask a client, you could even ask a peer, or it could be someone who you used to work with. Really, what we're looking for here are quality, deep recommendations. Someone who clearly knows you as an individual and clearly has experience of your potential and your actual skills, and are going to be able to explain that to us within a letter of recommendation. We're not particularly interested in someone's status or job title. We're much more interested in the quality of the recommendation that they can write for you. And when you start your application, my tip is to register your referees early. Once you've registered your referees can be working on their letters of recommendation in parallel with you completing the rest of your MBA application. Your referees are likely to be really busy people, so respect their time by A, asking them in advance whether they'd be happy to be your referee, and B, registering them early so that they can receive the email from us that tells them what to do, and they can be working on that alongside you working on your application. Now, for those of you who are citizens of countries that are not majority English speaking, as defined by the UK Border Agency, you may be required to provide the results of an English language proficiency test when you apply. Now, if you look at our website, there's a lot of detail there around the kind of scores that we're looking for. We only accept IELTS or internet-based TOEFL. And we're looking at minimum scores that you really need to hit when you apply. If you've been educated in English at degree level, so let's say, for example, you are an Indian citizen, so you're not majority English speaking as far as the UK government is concerned, so you would potentially need to take an English test. But let's say you attended a university where your degree was taught entirely in English. If you upload a letter from your university, or if that is stated on your degree transcript, upload that and we will consider waiving that test requirement for you. Equally, if you are, for example, let's say a Japanese candidate, so normally speaking, you would have to provide the results of an English test. But let's say you went to America to do your undergraduate degree. Well, of course, that was taught in English. So again, upload your degree transcript and we will see that you've been educated at degree level in English. And again, you will be exempted from that test.
Excellent, thank you, Charlotte. Great detail there. So moving on to really some areas that we think you should focus on in terms of strengthening your application. And these are things that I think you obviously want to focus on in terms of the written element of your application, but they also lead into obviously how your interview part of your application. You need to think about both of these things in tandem, because anything you put into the written part of your application, you may be required to discuss in-person interview. So I really sort of am going to talk about these in tandem. So things like Charlotte was alluding to there and speaking about regards the application requirements for your statistic or trend essay, obviously you want to be thinking about something that you do truly feel passionate about, because it may be that it's one of those things that brings out one of these areas when you then come to your interview. Also, when we talk about career vision. So I'm really going to go around these sort of 5 areas here. So these are things we are focusing on when we are also assessing you as a candidate. So the things we've seen on the previous slides are obviously quite factual things that we can really sort of look at your application and really sort of judge, assess your merits, your strength as a candidate. However, these are things that could be intangibles that you can look to express through your essays, through the written career part of your application, and then bring into that interview. So starting with leadership, you do not need to have leadership experience. You do not need to have managed people. We accept people coming with two years minimum of working experience, so therefore the chance of you having led or managed people might be quite slim. However, can you demonstrate leadership potential? We are looking to create the next generation of future leaders here at Oxford Said. So thinking about perhaps chances that you've had to show leadership qualities. Have you led on a project? Have you taken responsibility? Maybe where you haven't led other people, but you've had real autonomy for that and you've had to take a lot of responsibility. There are many ways in which you can demonstrate your potential as a leader. Clearly, if you are a manager and you are leading, then that may be seen as sort of simpler to do, but obviously don't just focus on that sort of day-to-day management piece. We really want to know about you as a person, your style. You're going to find yourself in group projects where maybe perhaps you have always assumed a leader position and you're finding yourself working alongside other people who aren't so confident as you, haven't been in those kind of situations, and you need to take a different role and you maybe need to step back and be a different person within that team. So we're really looking to understand your sort of fit here when we're talking about leadership. Moving on to communication. So how can you really show us your communication style through your written application? Obviously, communication is something that we can really test and discuss with you at interview. We can quite clearly get a sense of your interpersonal skills, your communication skills when working or discussing with others. But in terms of your application, how can you show your communication skills? On an MBA, you are going to be thrust into an environment, as we've said before, which is going to be hugely diverse. You're going to need to work and study and get involved in group projects alongside people that, as we've said, that you would never work or study or have studied with previously. So your ability to communicate is really important, and showing those skills. So perhaps in your CV, your essays, you might want to demonstrate how you've worked with others. If you do have quite a standalone role, then how do you seek out the ability to maybe work across a business? If you're a sole founder, how have you successfully communicated perhaps when you've been trying to raise funding, or perhaps you've been looking to recruit people to join you? There's many ways in which you can demonstrate your communication skills to us. So moving on, perhaps sort of teamwork, I've probably duplicated and already mentioned a few of those sort of areas, to be honest. But I think, teamwork is really crucial. And it's something that is really going to be an important part of your application as a whole, to really help us leave with the impression that you are going to be someone that is going to challenge others, and other people are going to be challenged by you. That fit to be in a team is absolutely crucial to the success of your MBA. So really just starting to get thinking about your ability to work in a team, how you perform when you work in a team, perhaps thinking about obstacles you have faced as well. That's definitely something that could come out in the interview part of the MBA. So we aren't looking for you to be a superhuman individual, and I think when it comes to teamwork, everybody faces obstacles and issues and things they need to overcome. So definitely think about that when you're crafting your application. When you're telling us about your work experience, are there times where you've had to work in a difficult team, things have not been going well, and you've been the person to step in and create the solution, perhaps as part of a project or a task? Career vision, I think Charlotte articulated that very well. But yes, what is the purpose of really taking a year out from your career, your life, to either make a change or accelerate or invest in yourself in terms of learning? What is the purpose of that? And I think for most people that will come back to obviously the vision of your career. So think about that. There is a section of the application that really goes through sort of a 4 to 5 step point plan, and we give you the option to choose either entrepreneurship or employment. So this is one of the reasons why I would actually suggest to start an application. If you are halfway to thinking that you might want to apply, open up an application. We by no means judge you on how long you keep that open for. You absolutely can have that open for as long as you wish, but you'll then see the questions that are embedded within that career section, and you can start to think about those perhaps on your commute to work, or when you need a break from the GMAT study. It's a really important part that we understand why you want to come here and what the future is going to hold for you. We obviously also want to make sure that we can be equipped to understand how we're going to need to support you. Are we going to be able to be the best business school for you in terms of your future career goals? And have you thought about in depth what that future looks like beyond the MBA the September following when you leave? And perhaps that comes quite well back to awareness. So do you have a good self-awareness of what you want to achieve? Is it realistic? This is Oxford. We are looking for people who have big, grand plans and big ideas, but equally, is that realistic? Is that something you could look to do straight after the MBA? Is that something that might be a sort of 2 to 3 step plan? So perhaps an example here of sort of entrepreneurship might be a good example. We all know that starting a business is not something that, and so therefore, if that's maybe your sort of plan, be realistic with yourself as to whether that is something that you could make happen straight after the programme. Also, I think awareness really comes into the application in terms of that statistical trend essay. When you're thinking about, you can show us a lot there about your sort of awareness of maybe something going on in the world, your understanding in terms of maybe your sort of business acumen, your commercial acumen, your real kind of knowledge of issues and how to tackle challenges. As a large part of the MBA is coming up with solutions to problems and how things might be done better. So I think awareness is a really key skill, both in terms of your business awareness as a potential business leader, but also your own awareness as an individual of the person that you are, the skills you need to acquire, and what you might be lacking at this point in your life. I think nobody comes to an MBA as a fully fledged CEO who knows everything. So definitely coming here with a humble view of yourself and the things that you need to really achieve is a definite plus point, I would say. Would you agree, Charlotte?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and come to an MBA with as Amy said, a good level of self-awareness and with a good spirit. Coming to the MBA to acquire knowledge and think about everything that you're going to get while you're here, but think also about everything that you have to give. I think being aware of your own experience, being aware of what you can do for your fellow students in the class, in terms of being open with your knowledge and generous with your time.
That's probably the least factual part of our presentation. Hopefully it's given you a bit of, as we'd call it here in the UK, fire in your belly to go and make a strong application. So application deadlines, very sort of a factual part here to cover. As you can see, 2 of those marked out in red, as 2 of our application deadlines have now passed. On that, actually, I've had a couple of questions coming in to my own inbox about the number of spots we have remaining. Now we are heading towards stage 3. We don't yet know how many spots we have remaining. The answer is we do still have spots. However, as you can see, the stage 2 deadline closed on the 2nd of November. So we have only just put out the interview decisions of who we will be interviewing from stage 2. So we will not be making offers for stage 2 until the 14th of December. And then those people have a month to obviously decide and put their deposit in to secure their places. So really the message is there will still be spots. So the overriding message I would leave anybody with is to apply for an MBA, be it this year or next year, with the best possible application you can give. Do not compare yourself to potentially those around you. Do think about the standard of application we are looking for and the general caliber of applicant that we obviously are hoping to have in our class. Obviously that is an important factor, but do not rush an application for the sake of a stage deadline. Sometimes people say, well, I applied early because if I hadn't have applied early, then I wouldn't have been in contention for scholarships. It's a bit of a catch-22. If you don't have a competitive application, then you probably rule your yourself out from contention for funding anyway. So your absolute aim should be to aim for admission, and then obviously a scholarship is absolutely a great icing on the cake to have, but aim for admission to the programme. So we've got 2 deadlines remaining. Absolutely, we recommend going for stage 3 over stage 4 if we are honest. The reason being that we do sometimes operate a wait list in that final round. So there will probably still be spots in that final round. There definitely has been in the last round for the last 2 years. However, they have been limited in our last rounds over the last 2 cycles. We have seen a year-on-year increase in applications certainly this year, so there is a chance this year that we may end up in a similar situation. There is, however, also the chance, if you end up with a waitlisted offer, that potentially we really thought you were a great candidate and we may sometimes provide a straight offer for the next year admission cycle. So that is something just worth considering. Any comments from you there, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think that's all good advice. First 3 stages, very broadly speaking, your chances of admission are pretty much the same. Stages 1, 2 and 3. Stage 3 is also the deadline, just going back to scholarships. It's also the deadline by which you must apply if you want to be considered for scholarships offered by Oxford University as a whole. The Central University Scholarship competitions do close on January 11th. So if you are a candidate in a position to make a really strong application and scholarship funding is important to you, then hit that January 11th deadline. But I think in terms of what Amy was saying around sort of quotas and whether there are spots still available, it's true that we don't have set numbers that we absolutely must fill each stage. We really are interested in quality, and it really depends how many applications we get and how good they are as to how many offers we are likely to make. We're not just going to admit people who are too weak for our programme. We really are building out a class of extraordinary individuals, and we'll make offers to people who we feel really fit that brief the closest. But certainly good advice not to wait until April the 5th. If you can apply earlier and you feel that you're in really good shape, do. But we will definitely be accepting people under the April 5th deadline also. You just run more of a risk that you might be waitlisted. Yeah.
Excellent. So just some next steps for you. So these probably are quite obvious. If you've met with us at an event, we are very environmentally friendly and have a very short 3-page flip brochure, so please do download our full online brochure for as much detailed information as you can find, and please do navigate through our MBA homepage. There is an absolute wealth of information. It works, it's our brand new website, and it works very well on your mobile, so you can do all your research whilst you're commuting. There is absolutely nearly everything that you need to know. If you are completely stumped and you cannot find what you need, then you can by all means contact us. But please do, I'm sure as you can imagine, we are overwhelmed on a daily basis with inquiries, and we will aim to get back to you as soon as possible. But please do navigate through that MBA homepage for information, particularly when it comes to the English language requirement. It is really clearly set out, but you do need to read that carefully. If you then have a question, obviously do let us know. I think start preparing for the GMAT or GRE. This is arguably the one thing that may stop you from making an application at the time that you want to. If you haven't tracked back in your calendar the time you might have available, got a firm understanding in your own mind of how long this is going to take you to really sort of master it and crack the GMAT, as people would say. So start that preparation. It's never too early to start that. And visit us at an open day or attend one of our events. So we do have open days here at the business school. Our next one, we just had an open day actually, so our next one is not until February the 15th. Just to mention a couple of webinars coming up. So we have a 1+1 webinar on the 28th of November, available to sign up to online already. We also have our next online information session, which will be more of a general information session, less focused on interview application tips, on the 4th of December. We also have a scholarship information webinar on Tuesday, the 11th of December. So that may be something that people might like to dial into to really get the full download on scholarship information. And we do have another application tips webinar before the stage 3 deadline. So there's lots of events. We are always actively traveling around the world, hosting different events. So please do look those up via the events section on the homepage of our website, and we would love to meet with you. And as I mentioned earlier, start your application. There is nothing wrong with getting that underway, starting to get a real sort of sense of what is involved in that. We only really ask for your personal details in order to get ready for that. Also, we may send certain mailings and certain updates around the application deadlines to the people that do have their applications in progress. So if you're planning to apply, don't sit in the background, get the application started, and we look forward to being in touch with you. So right, anything else from you, Charlotte?
Well, absolutely. I think it's a really, really good point to start your application now. A few reasons. We've already talked about the advantages of registering referees, yes, but as Amy's also said, around the careers piece, the questions that we ask you, they are really, it's quite a sort of useful reflective exercise to do anyway, just thinking about your future. And just measuring yourself against that aspiration and where you are now and how much of a leap it is. And it's a kind of question that you can come back to again and again and again as you finesse your answers and perhaps have a deeper conversation with yourself. And certainly preparing for those tests. Now, without wanting to bore you all too much around the mechanics of test taking, whilst I've said we really don't mind which test you take, and we honestly don't, there are some advantages to taking a GMAT over the GRE. And really the main advantage is that on the day that you take a GMAT, you get your provisional test scores on the day, which means that that crucial document that you need to upload to your MBA application, you have it and you can upload it, and then you know we've got it. With the GRE, there is a more considerable lag between taking the test and you being able to access your provisional scores online. It can be around a couple of weeks, 10 days, something like that. And of course, until you can download your provisional score document and upload it to your application, we're not going to be able to see it. So you need to think about juggling some of these documents and deadlines around when we need them, when you're going to be able to access them. So if you did have the chance to think about those two tests and you're thinking about booking for them and when you're likely to submit your application, you certainly have access to your GMAT score sooner than you would a GRE. So just be mindful of that. But whichever test you decide to go for, as part of your test taking fee, you can name up to 5 universities to share your scores with. So even though you upload your test document to your application, you also need to make sure that you name us as one of those schools, please. And that just really empowers us to log in to your test results and see your official final scores. So we do that online with your test provider. So make sure you've done that. There are a few questions coming in around the GRE, actually.
So can you update your test score after the deadline?
So if you've made an application and you've submitted it and you've provided all of your test scores and you've provided your test score document, provided we haven't already reached out to you around a shortlisting decision, then in theory, yes, you can still supply a new test score to us. So let's say, for example, you submit your application to us on a Friday, which happens to be the application deadline, but the next Tuesday you're retaking your GMAT and you do significantly better than that test that you took 18 months ago. Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to admissions then and provide us with your new copy of your test taker's results. And we'll make sure that that's appended to your application, even though you've already submitted it, because it's so soon after the deadline. Then, of course, we would welcome an enhancement to your application of that type.
We've got a question here around the GRE score range and how we convert that from GMAT to GRE. What makes a competitive range?
Okay, yeah, it's a really good question. With the GMAT, of course, you do have this sort of total score, as it were, but with the GRE, you don't. You just have the component scores around quantitative ability, the verbal section, analytical writing, and integrated reasoning. So it's fair to say we're looking for a fairly balanced performance across those quadrants, but looking just at quant and verbal, to put yourself around a 650 GMAT, so a fairly sort of middling competitive GMAT score, you'd be looking at a verbal and quant score of about 161. Something in that region. So I would say around 161 or 161 in verbal and quant in the GRE to be the kind of minimum scores you really want to be aiming for. Preferably something slightly higher than that if you are really wanting to put yourself in the mix with someone who's sitting on a GMAT score that's north of 700. And thinking about some careers, I know strategy consulting is always the one that springs to mind with some of the top houses that do set great store by the GMAT, actually. I think particularly because it tests your current intellectual ability, whereas maybe your university degree was quite a long time ago, so maybe it isn't necessarily still accurate and representative of your true ability. So they will look at a GMAT score quite closely, and be wanting to see a score of more like 720, 730, certainly for those of you who might be wanting to target Bain or McKinsey or an employer of that nature.
Certainly, I would add in the more competitive locations for those employers as well. So when do you think, if somebody were looking to apply by the 11th of January deadline, when would be the latest available test date? I would suggest for GMAT, you may get away with very early January. Reason being that GMAT, their SLA, so service level agreement, is to provide that within 20 days. They invariably do provide that sooner. But for GRE, I would really suggest before the end of December. Would you agree, Charlotte?
I'd say end of December for GRE, purely because you don't have access to your scores for 10 to 14 days or thereabouts, and you run the risk then of missing that 11th of January deadline for us. But in theory, GMATs you could take up until the 10th of January because you get your scores on the day. Your official scores, well, that's our job to access that after the deadline's passed, but you still need to upload your copy of your test results. So you absolutely need to lay your hands on those and provide them before January the 11th. So I think maybe generally speaking, you're wanting to get your tests squared away before the festive time of midwinter. You can relax, you've done your test, your application's in great shape, and that's really the kind of situation you want to find yourself in, rather than feeling really stressed during that period, with the impending deadline.
And so if Oxford Said has been chosen as one of the 5 schools to send the GMAT score to, you do still need to provide your test taker's copy and upload that into your application, just to clarify. Absolutely
right, Amy. Yeah, that is exactly what happens. So you need to upload your copy of your test results as a document to your application. Okay, whether it's GMAT or GRE, that's absolutely mandatory. The test scores that we then verify with ETS or Pearson VUE, depending on which test you've taken, we will do that after we've received your application, and we need your copy of your test result document in order to do that. Test scores are not physically sent to Oxford, we access them online, and we can only do that if you've made your scores available to our school.
So a question of whether 650 in the GMAT could be acceptable. So that could be acceptable. Obviously, as we've said, we are taking everything into overall view holistically. So perhaps if you have a lower range GPA, a 650 may not be enough if we are considering everything competitively. And obviously, we are also taking your essays, your references, your career vision, all of that into contention. So it really does depend on everything else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a binary thing with the test scores. We're not going to literally rule a line and say everyone with a score of under X is going to be rejected and everyone with a score in excess of X is going to be admitted. As Amy's just said, it's one aspect of your application. It can be a useful measure of how you're likely to cope with the class content, but it is just one aspect of your application.
And I think, just to add to that, I think I don't know the exacts, but I believe our GMAT range this year is from around 620 through to 790.
790,
yes.
Yeah.
So it's quite a range. So one would say, okay, what does somebody have that has a 620, there's obviously something there that has made us really interested. Equally, we may have rejected people with a very super high GMAT and everything else maybe doesn't quite stack up as strong. So it really is an overall holistic approach. So right, let's just move on to a couple more questions. So we have a question here around the number of seats for admission. So I think we covered off just a bit earlier. We do still have seats remaining. We obviously are looking to reach a cohort of around 320 students again next year. So we absolutely do have some spots left. And somebody here said that their friend already has an offer, and would this significantly reduce their chances? Well, I would say definitely not. Perhaps if you know somebody already has an offer, you might be able to get some tips and pointers from them. So
but we don't run any kind of quota system. If you're thinking that maybe we have a quota that we're aiming for from each country or territory, or even gender or anything like that, not at all. It's about sheer talent, it's about sheer merit, and it's about a really strong application with a really realistic reason and motivation for wanting to undertake the program. It's as simple as that.
Okay, right, we're just going to we've got quite a lot of questions coming in, so let's quickly go through some of these so we can make sure we get everything answered. Somebody is asking, is it crucial to have a job in hand while applying to the school with around 4 years work of experience? So I think you mean, is it important to be employed right now? So actually to be employed or to be working on something at the point of your application. I would say generally people would be working or involved in some kind of professional activity at the point of applying. Certainly, we would be looking to discuss with you what you have been doing if you aren't working or involved in a startup or some kind of academics. So if that's something that you maybe have a question mark on, you might want to look into that in a little bit more detail with us, just to see if that affects your candidacy for the programme. A good question here. So are there additional applications to be made to qualify for the scholarship? So I'm going to cover this really quickly because we have the scholarship webinar coming up on the 11th of December. But in essence, most of the scholarships for the business school you do need to just tick a box for. However, if you navigate to the MBA homepage, you go to funding, you will see that there is a list of what scholarships require extra work, and also for the wider University of Oxford scholarships you will also see which scholarships require maybe an essay or a full application, and some of those will lead to an interview as well.
Generally speaking, it's very few that you have to do anything else for. Generally Oxford scholarships, we will just derive a whole bunch of data from your application. We'll know where you're from, we know what you're doing work-wise, we'll know your gender, and there'll be various scholarship competitions that you will therefore meet the eligibility criteria for, so you'll automatically go into those scholarship competitions. But as Amy said, there are a handful where extra essays may be required, so check our website for more details of those scholarship competitions.
A question here around the English language TOEFL score. So I'm going to quickly go, we've got about 7 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly answer a few of these. Add anything in that you want to, Charlotte. So do you need to have the TOEFL score when you apply, or can you provide this later? You absolutely need to have that score at the point of your application and of submitting it. Obviously, if you aren't from an mainly English language speaking country, that is something that adds to your candidacy to the programme. If you have a very strong TOEFL score, then we obviously will be assuming that all of that great kind of communication stuff and your speaking and written ability is going to be really strong. So it adds to your candidacy to make sure you have that when you apply. Somebody who's had some audio issues, yes, it is being recorded, so we will be sending it out. Okay, good question here. This I think somebody may be slightly confused around the collegiate system. So just to be clear, your degree comes from the University of Oxford. You are studying within Saïd Business School. So think of the university, and it has a medicine department, a chemistry department, an English department. Saïd Business School is effectively a department of the university. You then have a membership to one of the Oxford colleges. So we have a collegiate system here at Oxford. if you literally Google Oxford graduate colleges, there's some great wealth of information on our college system. Have a look around and get a bit more information there. Do you need to have a 2-year minimum work experience does that have to be a full-time job? So somebody here who started a business from the time they were at school. So if this were part-time work while studying, this wouldn't count. It does need to be full-time employment or working on your own business full-time post your degree. Should your CV include both academic and professional career? Yes, absolutely. Also, something I would just quickly add there is we want to know about you outside of your professional life as well. Yes. We want to know about your whole self. So do tell us about you outside of your professional academic life. Maybe quite briefly in your CV, perhaps 2 or 3 key things if you have something to add. And perhaps that might be something you might expand on in your second essay.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. Essay 2 is a really good place to tell us a little bit more about you, what makes you tick, and it could be what you like to do when you're not working. Tell us something about that. It could be something that you spend quite a lot of time doing away from the world of work, where you really are demonstrating your leadership potential and qualities. For example, even if perhaps in the workplace you are not a manager in the classic sense, so you very well might have great leadership qualities and be using those strengths a lot, but just not in a work context. So think quite broadly about everything that you can bring to our class.
How are our interviews conducted? So you will be invited to an in-person interview experience here in Oxford, which consists of a college dinner, some great sessions here at the business school, and also your interview. However, if you can't attend that, that does need to be self-funded, I should add, and you obviously do need to get your visa if that's something that is required, but you will also have the option of a Skype interview, and also at each application stage we will be in usually a couple of key global hubs at each application stage.
Yeah, we'll usually be in New York, Singapore, and a city in India, either New Delhi or Mumbai, for each stage. We try and get to those 3 sort of key global cities each stage, but of course we always have limited slots. So if you are shortlisted for interview, we make the full schedule available to you at that time, so you can jump straight in and hopefully secure a slot that suits you best. But if you can't manage a face-to-face conversation with one of the admissions committee, then Skype is always there as an option for you. And in terms of the kind of conversation that you're going to have with your interviewer, it's exactly the same whether it's in person or via Skype. A Skype interview is not a second best option by any stretch of the imagination, and sometimes it purely comes down to time of day and availability.
Okay, we are at 14:58. So we're just going to, if you do need to leave dead on 1500 hours, please do so, but we'll just cover off these last questions really quickly now. So, is it possible to balance an internship with proximity to London, working part-time at a London company? We do not suggest that you work whilst you are on this degree. It's a very full-time degree. There is also a lot going on in Oxford. There will be speaker events, there will be dinners, there will be networks, things that you'll want to be a part of in the evening. So it is a full-time demanding schedule. We don't recommend that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And for the same reason, if you are admitted to the programme, we expect you to live no more than 20 miles from Oxford. We really do want you to be here. Really enjoy your year, get everything you can possibly get out of it, and that means being here on the ground in Oxford, at the school, at your college, really getting everything out of a year at Oxford and everything it has to offer you.
Right, a couple of last questions. Okay, if you don't have your TOEFL or IELTS, is it possible to receive a conditional admission offer? Unfortunately not. No, you do have to definitely have that in place.
And just on tests, just for a quick aside, you need to make sure that your tests are valid in terms of how long ago you took them. So if it's an English test that you're providing us, it needs to be taken within the last 2 years prior to your date of application, please. And for the GMAT and GRE, your test results need to be no older than 5 years at your date of application.
Someone here with 10 years work experience, would we recommend an MBA or executive MBA? I would say probably, unless you have reached quite a senior level in your career, then the full-time MBA could be the best solution still to go for. Great to see all these comments coming in. We do have a resume template, which is not you don't have to use this format, it's just an advisory. So if you do want to use another one-page CV format, absolutely feel free to do so. It's amazing how everyone sends through these questions right near the end, some of them, and the template is on the website. Okay. Somebody thinking of coming with their family, yes, obviously that's something that you need to take into account in terms of the demands, in terms of the timing of the course. So you absolutely want to make time for your family, but that is something that will be a time commitment you will need to consider. So just to clarify, no, the interview trip to the campus isn't sponsored by the business school, sadly. So if your recommenders have not written the references in English, and the English is not perfect, is that an issue? No, absolutely not.
It needs to be in English, and understandable for us.
Yeah.
So we'd normally recommend, if your referees are not able to write a letter for us in English, they will need to get that translated. Not by you, of course. References are supposed to be confidential, but we do expect references and all documents to be in English, please. And also your transcripts. If your original transcripts are not in English, please have them professionally translated by a certified translator and upload those to your application.
In the post-MBA plan section, in the entrepreneurship and the employment careers section, there isn't a character limit. So this does open up potentially to you to give us reams and reams of information and several pages. I would sometimes say generally a sort of healthy amount of